In today's episode, we're going to go into the best way to grow with $0. But I'm super excited. We are sitting down with Geekdom's own EIR, Brian Sierakowski, a successful founder himself. He is now the entrepreneur resident at Geekdom. So we're going to dive into some of his most common questions he gets when people book meetings with him in our space. So let's dive in. What's going on, Geekdom community? Super excited. I'm here with a special guest, Brian Sierakowski, and our first episode of what we're calling Berate Brian, where we take some of our top questions, be it from the Geekdom community or just folks in general that are trying to start a business, and dive into like, hey, what is it like having a Geekdom mentor? So before I kind of kick it off, Brian, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be at Geekdom?
Oh, yeah. The dreaded question of who are you and what do you do? So I came to Geekdom. I've been a Geekdom member as long as I've been in San Antonio. I landed in San Antonio a Geekdom member because I sold my business to a company here in San Antonio that was called, at the time, Jungle Disc. It's called Cyber Fortress now. And so literally as soon as, wheels down in San Antonio, I was in Geekdom. Actually, I think I went to the Geekdom office before I even went to the Jungle Disc office. So I've been involved in Geekdom for 7-8 years now. Have really enjoyed my time here. And then recently, as I've become the EIR, much more involved now and just super excited to meet everybody here and try to, help them not make as many mistakes as I made building my business.
No, rock on. And so the way today works for those of you who are watching is we've got a bunch of questions that were submitted from a lot of our members, and we're just going to hit Brian with as many as possible. What this is designed to emulate is if you are a Geekdom member, we have this awesome thing. Because he is our entrepreneur in residence, you can come ask him your own questions. But because not all of your members, we're going to ask him some of the most common ones live here today. So we're going to start off with, what is one thing that most people get wrong when starting their business?
Yeah. The advice I find myself giving most frequently to early stage entrepreneurs is to ensure that you're solving a real problem. And that's something that sounds obvious.
That other people have too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like find a problem that at least one person has. That's a great start. And it seems very obvious, and it feels obvious. I've done the same thing where I've started businesses where the core reason why it didn't work is that I wasn't actually solving a problem. And so that's kind of the main thing of like, there are a lot of, we are in an imperfect world. There's plenty of things that we can do, things to make the world a better place. But in order to start a business that's going to be successful, you need to find a problem that other people have. And ideally, they are actively looking for a solution to that. It's like a big enough problem that they're out there trying to solve the problem on their own. And so if you start from that, you at least have a chance. If you're going after and you're building something that there's no real need for in the market, everything is just a million times harder, and it's very discouraging to not get any feedback as you're pushing forward.
Yeah. So let's say you found that magical problem, you're kind of working on that idea. A lot of folks come to us at Geekdom super early on in their journey, which I think is a pivotal time for entrepreneurs. So within that first 0 to 6 months, what is the most important thing you can be doing as a founder to get traction?
Well, yeah, I think it's how we define traction is an important part. And so I think that's like getting in front of customers. I find that, or trying to get in front of customers, kind of doing sales. Sales is something that's very scary to a lot of people. And there's a lot of things that you can do within business that feel productive, but ultimately aren't moving you towards getting that customer. Creating your LLC and making your logo, creating a website and writing up a business plan. These are all things that are, important in one way or the other. But sometimes people are dancing around the outside of like, okay, you need to get in front of somebody and you need to say, I'm going to solve this problem for you. You're going to give me money. Like, what do you think about that? Yeah. How are you feeling with that? And so really that is like the key level of validation. Because once you start going down that path, you will realize you have all these other questions of like, well, okay, get in front of somebody and say that you're going to provide a service and you're going to charge money from them. It's like, okay, who is that person? How much money? What is the problem? And what is the product? Like, what is the exact offering? Is this a consultancy? Is this all those sorts of things. So, I really think that as much as you can say, there's a extent to which you can operate without having a business and things like that. But really, I would say if you can get somebody that's committed to give you some amount of money before you start doing anything else, that would be best. That is pretty unrealistic. You have to make some progress along the way to show, to the person that, you are for real and and even what the products is, like, what is there for me to buy. So I think that, but, imagine in the ideal world, we have an idea for a business. We go out and we say, hey, if I solve this problem for you, would you pay me $500? And someone says yes. Like that is an awesome place to start from.
Yeah, I love that answer too, because I think one of the problems that a lot of founders face is they're like, oh, I'm so busy. I'm doing so much. I've done so many things. And you kind of ask them, okay, like, what have you done? And I don't want to discredit their work. It's still important, but I think it's a mispriority of, well, I've got my logo and I spent all this time designing a website. And I was like, okay, well, have you showed anyone? I was like, well, no, it's not ready yet, or this isn't done, or that isn't done. And I was like, you'll get so much more value out of just going, even if, like, go to the Pearl one day and talk to 100 people and just pitch them on your idea. And you might get 99 no's or a bunch of people walking away, but you'll learn so much more from that day than you will from sitting in your room all alone, like filling out paperwork for 12 hours.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. People think, they hear like, oh, talk to 100 people, get 99 no's. Like that's the situation even once you have the product. And like,
it doesn't stop.
Exactly. Like even, any product out there is getting 99 no's for every one yes. So it's I don't know, maybe that's scary. It doesn't get any easier than that. So if that's terrifying, beware what's coming in advance. But yeah, I think one of our local entrepreneurs here, Michael Girdley, calls it playing house when entrepreneurs are playing house. So you have to be really careful about that because it feels good. And it's all stuff that you don't know about either. So it does feel novel to create your LLC and do,
it doesn't move the needle at all. And I think this is the risk of it.
Yeah. And it kind of keeps us out of that scary zone of talking to customers and asking for money. Like it's like, the sooner you can rip the Band-Aid off and start asking people for money for the problem that you're solving, it's also a really good way to get real feedback. Because if you go up to somebody and be like, hey, like I'm going to solve this thing. Like, what do you think? And they're like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. Sure, why not? Well, would you pay me $100 for that? And they're like, no.
Yeah, then it's like, absolutely not. Like,
like why not?
Dramatically look at the camera for this one. If you ask people for feedback, but don't ask them for money, they will always give you positive feedback. Like 9 times out of 10, ask for some sort of thing to make it real, because no one wants to tell the weird stranger that like, yeah, I know that idea is terrible. Like they'll be like, oh no, this is great. Leave me alone. I'm going to brunch now.
Sure.
So I think like figure out some way to twist the knife to make it, mean something.
You make it real for them. Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of scary stuff, so another scary thing for being an entrepreneur is most of this is done all either bootstrapped or no budget. So what would be your kind of tips if you wanted to start today with essentially effectively $0 outside of maybe like your registration fees? Like what would you do to start ramping up your business?
Not to be a broken record, but the sooner we go and find that customer to pay us money,
it solves it.
I used to work for this private equity firm, and the owner of the firm would always say, "Revenue cures all," and so that's true at day 0, and it's true at day 1,000.
Forever,
we kind of would make the joke of like, well, if you have a marketing problem, but you have a lot of money. Well, you don't actually have a marketing problem. Just like go and hire people, buy ads, whatever the case is. If you have a marketing problem, you don't have money. Well, now you really do have a marketing problem. And so, I think that. So I think it's again. We won't belabor that because we've already kind of spoken to that. But the other thing too is just kind of like, I would say dramatically expand the degree, like what your personal abilities are. And so when I started my first business, I wasn't a developer. I didn't write any software. I had a co-founder that wrote all the software, and he was a full-time developer. And so it was like every weekend we would get together to work on it. And then it was like every other weekend. Then it was like once a month. Then it was like once every couple of months. And I was like, okay, he's just kind of like slowly starting to ghost me. And I could either just let this idea go, or I could go through the process of like, I could just build it myself. Like how hard could it be? Turns out it's really, it's really hard, but if you kind of expand your timelines and say like, okay, well, it's not critical that I get this done, this month, or, this quarter, what if this unfolds over the next 2 years? And that's basically what happened. I worked nights and weekends on the product for 2 years before we had enough customers that I could go full time on it. And now I'm just like technical forever. Like I'm not like an amazing developer, but compared to somebody who's never built and sold a company, like I'm pretty
doing
high.
Okay,
I'm doing all right. But that's something that, because I didn't have the money, I couldn't just go and hire somebody, especially a developer. It's like so expensive. And I didn't want to work with an outsourced firm, and then you're doing all the management. And so, kind of like almost like the invest in yourself type situation, like, dramatically redefine like what your scope of, capabilities are. And like, if you don't know, then you learn. And then again, we're talking about day 0, like you don't know much and you need to learn a lot. When you get to day 1,000, you're still dealing with novel situations. And it's kind of your job as the founder to be the one who figures out like, okay, what even is the problem? What should we prioritize, to your point? And then like, how do we get this done? It's always going to be a skill set forever.
Yeah, I really like how you frame that as kind of investing in yourself, because a question we commonly get to kind of related to that is as you're growing, how do you deal with things like imposter syndrome, where it's like, am I finally at the point where have I bitten off more than I can chew? Or like, especially you in your own journey, right? At any point you could have said, you know what? I don't know how to code. I think I've hit my limit. But you said, no, like I'll figure this out. Sure. So for a lot of folks, that's kind of be it a confidence wall or just some sort of gap they face? What would you suggest to them to kind of push over that barrier to keep going?
Yeah, it's really hard initially. Like I think that the long-term confidence comes from having solved similar problems. And so like, because I've had successful companies in the past, now I have a little bit of a better instinct around what I want to spend my time on and businesses that I want to build and, that sort of thing. But because I have like a little bit of internal pattern matching. I'm like, oh, I know when I tried this, that failed. When I did this, it worked. And then when I did the same thing in a different situation, that failed. You start to kind of learn. And so like, I think that, it's like confidence comes from having it, and like, putting the work in. And like, now when I talk to a potential customer for a product that I'm building, like, I just know it's going to work for them. And I know that, provided that we're solving the problem, all the stuff I just said before, like, I know that however hesitant they are of like, oh, I don't know if this will work for our business. If I have extreme confidence.
I can show you.
I can show you, like, we've built enough that, and I'm confident. Like, I know we can figure it out. And so, that's in the future though. And so I do think in the early stages, you do have to, I don't know, maybe there's a faith component or something. I don't know, but you have to be like, hey, like, one thing that you can commit to is that I have whatever skills that I have.
Yep.
And if the business requires additional skills from me, I am committed to developing those skills. Like, and so it's like, I either can know it or I can learn it. And so I think if you have that sort of mentality where you're like, well, I'm not a developer. I think developers are great because it's like learning how to write software is really like notoriously difficult to get started. Like even like going from, nothing to like one line of code, especially like deployed into the.
You got to take a leap. There's a whole lot. You got to sit.
Exactly. And so if you can commit to being like, hey, like I can learn anything. The people who are software developers are not like a different, different
type of human.
Exactly. Not a different species. It's just like everybody started somewhere. That might be the other thing that's useful. It's like I started and I'm still like such an idiot in so many different, aspects of my life generally and also entrepreneurship. So it's like, to me, it's also, again, having that perspective when I see somebody coming in that's got a great idea and they've got some initial traction. It's really easy for me to be like, yeah, like you can do this because like people might look at me and be like, wow, Brian, he's so cool. Actually, I don't know if anybody's ever thought that before.
I say that all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So, But it's like, I'm like, I am not, I'm definitely not cool. I'm like I'm like the most like incapable person ever. I just like, stuck with it, maybe limiting the number of things that you focus on and then just committing to, again, my first business unrolled over like 7 years. Yeah. So it's like, what you can accomplish this month is like pretty small in scope. But like, if you really focus on one problem to solve and it's a real problem and that sort of thing, if you focus on that for 7 years, it's you'll be surprised how quickly the wins can stack on itself.
Yeah, I think I really like that advice because it reminds me of something I've loved that I've heard time and time again, where it's about getting in the reps with entrepreneurship. Be it like, oh, well, I don't know, I'm afraid to do sales calls. Okay, make 100, and they'll be terrible, and you'll hate it. And the next 100 will be a little less bad, and the next 100 will be a little less bad. And be it your first line of code or your first marketing ad that bombs. Like I think you learn so much from just doing it.
You got to do it
because what we see here, be it at Geekdom or for a lot of entrepreneurs, they get these grandiose ideas, right? Say, I'm fresh out of seeing Shark Tank. I could do that. I have this thought. I have this concept. And they go out and say, oh, but now it's time to press. Now I actually have to put myself in a position where someone can say like, oh, this is a dumb concept.
Right.
And that's okay. But getting over that, just get over that. Like you just have to be able to, hey, I'm going to get the no's. I'm going to fail this a couple of times. But if I keep doing it, I'll eventually I will get better. I will learn. And I think that mindset is pretty pivotal. And kind of leaning into that mindset. A lot of the times when you go to teach yourself those things, a lot of it is, hey, where do I go? Or is it, do I teach myself online? Do I Google it? Sure. Is it a mentor? Is it a mentee? Do you have any advice for folks that are like, hey, I'm trying to put in the reps. I'm trying to learn. What outlets would you take to find, peer groups or other people to, learn with, if you will?
Well, if you're in San Antonio, Texas, I would recommend coming to Geekdom.
Hey,
110 East Houston.
Come check us out.
Come
for
check
real,
us out. Yeah, get on down here. The first 500 people. Obviously, like Geekdom's super helpful, and I do think that one of the things that's like a little bit unusual with entrepreneurship is that it's a very rare, even to want to do this stuff. It's like pretty rare, and I think it's become more popular, like you said. Kind of, Shark Tank has, in the same way that like Great British Bake Off has made us all bakers. Like Shark Tank has made us all investors and entrepreneurs. So I think the number's higher than it's been before. But still, if you go and share, from a founder perspective, like if you're talking to people as customers, like the world's your oyster. Yeah. But if you want to talk to somebody else who, has even had any moderate amount of success building a business, like it's extremely hard to find that person. So looking for the concentrations, like a Geekdom or wherever you are in the world, finding that group of people, because it's just frankly what you're doing is not going to make any sense to, and it's like it is actually kind of like actively dumb to be like, especially if you're technical. It's like, okay, so you're like not going to go and work somewhere for like $250,000 a year. Instead, you're going to make $200 a month, and you're going to do that for like 7 years.
Eat nothing but ramen, and maybe have more than $200 in a couple of months.
Yeah, and so unless you've like had the calling, it's like it's not going to make sense. So finding that group of people, it could be in person, it could be online. I'm a part of a couple of different like entrepreneurial groups, and you kind of find them, over time, and through different connections. I joined one marketing group that was kind of like a group of people. We would meet up an hour a day and do marketing stuff, and it was like force us to do marketing and then be able to bounce ideas off of each other. And then somebody I met in that group was like, hey, like, well, we've got this other, it's like, so it's kind of like the only way to do it is to move forward. But yeah, I think kind of looking for that community is really helpful, both online and in person, and then also kind of like from like a founder perspective, but also kind of from like a domain, like if you are building a tech company, like finding where the developers are, and like even just hearing like one of the hardest things about learning software, or really any of these, like marketing, sales, like if you don't know anything about sales, like sales is like a hyper scientific thing. Yes. And there's a phrase, it's like, you might get in the room of like, oh, I'm having such a hard time closing sales. And if you're talking to salespeople, they're like, okay, like, what's your opener? Yeah. And you're like, what do you mean? Or like,
they just fall back and die.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what do you mean? What do I mean? Yeah.
Like, how are you handling objections? And you're like, I don't know what that means. So it's like, just having someone say like, here's like some key vocab, to go and research could catapult you forward. So it's really about, finding that group of people and surrounding yourself with them. And then again, to what we were saying before, just becoming a student and, kind of learning and always trying to get better at that stuff.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite, I'm stealing this from a member, but they always said, I loved the Geekdom community because it's nice to know people are as crazy as I am.
Yes.
When I'm doing stuff.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of, especially entrepreneurs, and you kind of made the joke with the developers too, but I used to joke that I don't think my parents have known what I've done like for work since like 2010, since I got into this space. And it's just because it's so different than... it's hard to describe to your friends, like, oh, after your 9 to 5, you're going to go like work your 5 to 9 because like that's where your passion's at. And they're like, what are you doing? And I was like, no, it's like, man, if I can just make this work, if I can do this. So I think you will be shocked at how much a peer group will help you, even if it's not necessarily to learn more. Like, well, that's a huge value just to have other people that are like in the grind or in the trenches to be like, oh man, like, It was tough today. Like I called a bajillion people and they all said no. And like I just want to get a coffee with someone who's also getting coffee at 6 p.m. because we've got a long night ahead of us. And I think that value is community just goes a long way. So 100%. Excited to hear that you feel the same way about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd say in terms of just like the scope for businesses we're seeing right now, do you have any thoughts on, hey, if you were going to start something today in any specific verticals, what do you think the most brightest futures for certain verticals or businesses are? If you were to like, hey, if you had to start something, the next month, where would you want to play? Yeah,
it's a great question. I think that there's two ways to look at it. So I think we could kind of look at it like a top-down approach. Like I think that there are, and my bias, I'm a software guy and I'm a B2B guy. So that's kind of like a lot of the opportunities that I evaluate, looking at. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you're kind of always selling into a specific department. And which department you choose can kind of determine like, well, what are we kind of looking at? I've always found, my experience selling into sales and marketing is like companies are willing to spend a lot more money to get new customers, so selling into the sales space. And then especially with, there's all the AI stuff happening. It's kind of affecting everything on a pretty linear basis. So you have to be kind of mindful of that. It's like operating into a lot of competition, but, I think kind of like from a top down, I don't think you could go too wrong being like an AI sales company or something like that. Like kind of like it's got a lot of the keywords that like, that narrow us in on like.
It used to be blockchain. Now it's AI.
Totally. Yeah. And so, but I kind of think almost like bottom up, it's like if you know nothing about AI and you know nothing about sales and you're looking for an entry point, that top down approach is like, well, I don't know. I guess it wouldn't hurt, but like everybody's got some level of experience and some level of problem that they're drawn to solving. And so I almost think that's kind of more important of like, again, we're talking 5 to 10 year time spans. I think 7 is the average. So it's like, think about like, let's say there is like a great, very lucrative opportunity doing like AI sales agents. That's still, even if you're in like the super hot space, it's not going to take off overnight. And so are you in 2 years from now, are you still going to be super motivated to continue working in the, really absence of like a lot of like positive feedback? Probably not. No. So I do think probably the more like appropriate ways to kind of, I've always started businesses trying to solve a problem that I've had in the past. With my first business was a password manager. I was working at a company. We had the spreadsheet full of passwords, and we had a bunch of interns in a bunch of different college.
Leak all the passwords.
Well, and it was like these interns would like or kind of like they were like college students in college markets, and they would just turn over all the time. And because we had so many different markets, it was like it wasn't like every single person turned over, but there was like probably like one person left every 3 weeks. And so it's like at least once a month, myself, I was like the product manager guy, and our COO and some other people would, director of support, we'd be like, all right, well, I'll start at the bottom of the spreadsheet. You start at the top. And I'm like, man, there's like gotta be a better way to do this. And so, that was kind of the intuition that led me towards building a password manager. And I've had other product ideas that have come from my issues like with customer retention and things like that didn't pan out. But I don't know. I think if you kind of look forward from that perspective, it helps you with the initial validation of one, I'm motivated to solve this problem because I've had it. I know there's at least one person in the world that has the problem, me. And then you also kind of a lot of things around like, well, what would a great solution to this look like in absence of, because one of the things you're just like super data starved when you're first getting started. You're like, well, who is this for and how might the solution work and what are the other alternatives on the market? You don't really know any of those things. So, but you do if you're kind of solving the problem for yourself, especially if you were looking for a solution and you couldn't find it. Like that's a great entry point. So, I think about it from that perspective. It's like some people are super filled with entrepreneurial energy. They want to do something now. And so, and that could work too. Like you can just like say like, hey, I'm going to dedicate this time and try, to your point, on reps. If you just put time in and do anything, you're going to get better. But there is kind of a timing component where you've kind of developed the necessary skills and then you kind of like identify the opportunity. I was just chatting with one of our member companies here at Geekdom, and she was kind of going through, she's been running a business, and she gave this like one, well, I don't want to share too much, because this is like still like in motion, but something happened and there was like an audible feeling of like problem, product market validation in the room.
Like it's real.
Yeah. And I'm like, you might need to go after that thing that you did. There was a pop, like it was like, and that happens like never, like, and so you just notice it immediately when it happens. I'm like, whoa, there was something there. And so this person has been grinding for a long time and has worked really hard, has developed a ton of skills, and, we'll see what happens. This new direction might not work out either, but, it's something worth testing. And so that's kind of like, I think that's why you find a lot of lifelong entrepreneurs, because it's kind of, I don't know, it's like a video game. It's
once
like
you're hooked too, it's hard to stop.
It's like you start developing the skills and you're like, okay, I'm like level 5 now, and then like maybe I'll quit, and you get like a new sword. You're like, okay, it's like, okay, I'll keep going, and it's like, okay, well now I'm level 10, and
I'm gonna re-roll. It's a different company.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I can fight this boss now, and I can try to do this thing. So just kind of like it is like the ultimate snowball experience of like you start off little tiny and you develop skills and you start noticing even your ability to notice those opportunities improve. And so it is kind of something like the sooner you get started, it's the sooner you kind of get to that epiphany, but it still could be like 5 years in, it's not overnight.
Yeah, and I think that's a fun way to approach it too. I had an old boss who I used to laugh, and he was like, we were always like, oh, like, what are your hobbies? And he goes, no, this is my hobby.
This is my hobby.
And he's like, because he's a big VC investor, and essentially all of his plays were just like, oh, I can learn this industry, I can play on this thing, and it is very much once you have the bug, if you will, you just start seeing life, I think, through a different lens of like, what is this problem? Can I identify? Is this something I can do? Is this a connection I can make? Is this so? I think if you know you have that. Don't be afraid to lean into it. I think it can be scary. It can be a different, challenge. But I think there's a community there for you. There's a lot of folks working on it.
Totally.
So I think step into the light, if you will.
It's a total sickness. Like my company I'm working on now is doing like product updates because I'd always like had the issue of like we write all the software and we tell nobody about it, and then that's like. So like we wasted all of our time and then all of our customers left or, didn't find us. And so it's exactly what you're talking about. It's like anytime I'm like interacting anywhere in the world and anything seems like a product update or an announcement or a marketing, it's just like, it never turns off where I'm like, oh, like that was a really nice update. I should save that. Or, whatever. I'm like, watching TV and I'm like, oh, he actually gave a pretty good,
Yeah, like I'll write that down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a total sickness for sure.
No, rock on. All right. Well, a cool way we love to end these is we kind of flip it around a little bit. So we've obviously asked you a lot of questions kind of from the mentor point of view. Would love to hear kind of some of the best advice you've gotten. So if you could pick like, one like major thing that helped you kind of in your track as an entrepreneur, what was that advice and, why was it so impactful?
Yeah. Wow. I've made so many mistakes and I've gotten so much advice that I've ignored. Let me try to think of something that is like relevant of the moment.
Dramatic pause.
Contemplative silence. I've been getting a lot of feedback. I mean, this is like, I guess over time the feedback gets more specific, and because you kind of like, you hopefully get yourself into a situation where you're kind of like in the ballpark of where you should be. But one of the issues with running a business and starting a company is that like nothing's fixed. I always talk to people all the time. It's like, well, you could like change your product. You can change who you sell to. You could change how you communicate with that person. It's like how you position and package your product, and any of those things can change. It's like, okay, well, you pitch your product a certain way to a certain type of person, and that doesn't work. So maybe we'll pitch to a different person. Oh, maybe it's the same person. And so I've gotten recently a lot of feedback now that I'm kind of back into that early stage again around really like testing, like being deliberate and testing everything and like testing different messages. And I think that really maybe the actual insight is like how important positioning is, and like how you can say like, trying to give like an abstract, try not to just like pitch my company. It's like in the abstract, you can like talk about your product from a features and benefits perspective. It's totally dry and it could be totally factual, but that might not land versus being able to speak to a customer and being like, hey, like here's like the benefit, or like, hey, like, don't you hate when this problem happens? And if they're like, yes, I have to deal with that every day. It costs me 2 hours every day to deal with that problem.
You're like, oh boy, do I have the math equation for you.
Exactly. And so those could be the exact same product, but just being able to figure out like the right positioning and spending time on that and working on the offer and working on the positioning is something that it doesn't come, at least for me, it doesn't come naturally. It's something you have to actively work on. And I was just in a session here earlier today. I think like a 5 to 10% improvement in positioning can double your sales. So I
could not agree more.
Yeah, that to me is something that, especially again, kind of coming into this in a little bit more of a techie way, you're looking at specs and you're looking at numbers and features and that sort of stuff. And it's really like, hey, if you can really get a potential customer to imagine using the product and seeing how much better their life is, like that is probably worth working on more than getting all those little features and, making the web page like, 1,000 pixels longer with more text.
Yeah, benefits first, I think is a great way to lead that. Well, Brian, thank you so much. This was super awesome. If you enjoyed listening and watching along, you can talk to Brian anytime you want if you are a Geekdom member. So if you want to check it out or come visit Geekdom, check out the links in our bio. And you can hang out with us for the day and check out any of our amazing programs coming up. But that's all for now. Thanks again for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Make sure if you have questions of your own because you want to scale your business, first like and subscribe, and then submit your questions in the comments below.